Hello everyone, welcome to From Combat Boots to Business Suits, the podcast brought to you by the Officers Association Scotland. Today we're going to be talking all about veterans in the finance sector, and joining me on the show is the wonderful Mr. Ken Neilson. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's such a pleasure to have you here, and we are actually in the Tesco Bank offices in South Gyle, which you won't be able to see behind us, but there is, I am told, and I have seen it with my own eyes, a view of the castle right behind us. So this is sort of the room where you would bring, I don't know, what would you use this for with the view?
So I am reliably informed this is where they do a lot of the recording for the execs and a lot of the content for things like internal comms and external comms. So I feel very privileged for us to be in here today.
Yeah, we've been given this room. So Ken, obviously we're here to talk about the finance sector and that as a sort of viable option for service leavers as a kind of post-military career. But before we get into that, it would be great to kind of rewind the clock and go back to, you know, right at the beginning when you decided to sign on and have a life in the military and a career in the military. Can you just explain to me kind of what your motivations were and that sort of a brief overview of your career in the forces?
Yeah, no worries. So I joined the army in 2008. I was actually on my Modnet laptop last night and saw that I'd been in service for 17 years, which makes me feel really, really old. So I finished or got to my last year of university. I was studying history and politics and basically panicked and thought, no idea what I want to do after this. So I started applying for everything. I'd never been in the OTC, I'd never been in the TA as it was then, but thought the army was definitely the life for me. So I signed up and joined and turned up at Sandhurst on day one with the ironing board and the suits with a man in I understood to be a skirt shouting at me and pointing a stick, which turned out to be my colour sergeant instructor, Xander Russell, and never really looked back. So I commissioned into the infantry. So I joined the Duke of Lancaster's regiment, served 6 years at regimental duty over in Catterick, so platoon commander, company 2IC, ops officer, did 2 tours of Afghanistan, was directed to army headquarters, the captain, which to be honest actually was probably one of the best jobs I did in the army. I worked for a guy called the Army Inspector, which sounds very grand, but worked in a brilliant team. Went to Staff College for ICSE when I promoted to Major, and then my last job as a regular officer was over in Glasgow at the Army Personnel Centre. So I was SO2 infantry soldiers, which I, again, really, really enjoyed, worked with a great team, but decided that for family reasons, for stability, that actually a career in the military probably wasn't best suited to what we wanted to do, and took the decision to leave and explore opportunities elsewhere.
Was that a difficult decision to make? Like, were you personally quite comfortable in your career in the army, but felt that clash with family life, or did you also feel like professionally you were ready for something new?
If I'm being really honest, I loved my time in the army. I'd still be serving today. I'd still serve as a reservist, and we can probably talk about that later. But I felt a bit selfish, if I'm going to be honest. My wife, by background, is a teacher, primary school teacher, and found as we were moving around the country, the kind of spouse employment opportunities were quite challenging. Had a young family, and when I looked to the future to see what the future held in terms of, and it's a decision that any serving person needs to kind of make as a family in terms of, and there's no right or wrong decision for them in terms of, do you move the family every 2 years, which is quite disruptive, but you stay together as a unit? Do you send your kids to boarding school? And CA is a fantastic opportunity and enabler for those that decide to do that. We took the decision that we don't want to send our children away, and everyone else has to make their own kind of decision on that. And then the option of the kind of weekly commuting, which seems, I think, more and more popular nowadays, where you buy a house somewhere, you get settled, you get the family settled, but you are away during the week. My parents were divorced when I was quite young, and I didn't want to be a weekend dad. So that really kind of limited the options as to. So I was desperate to carry on serving, hence joining the reserves when I left the regulars. But in terms of career, brilliant. It's that challenge and sacrifice the family have to make, which, again, every serving person has to kind of consider and make that judgment.
As the more I have these conversations, you know, it is the thing that comes up time and time again. And in our household, it was the exact same thing. You know, my husband decided to sign off just before we had our first child for that exact reason. Just didn't want to be a weekend dad, didn't want to move the family around. It wouldn't have suited me, selfishly either. So yeah, I totally understand. So okay, you've done this really, what sounds like a really exciting and enjoyable career, and suddenly you've signed off.
Yep.
How was that? How was resettlement for you?
So I was reflecting about this last night, when we were having a conversation today, and it was so my wife and I discussed it. It was a family decision. It wasn't something I did unilaterally. Thought about it for a long time. My journey, I think, was slightly different to many others. So the kind of prompt for me to leave was there was an opportunity to go and work in a family business. So I was actually going to set myself up as self-employed. So I kind of knew what I was going to be doing. I remember going into the office on the Monday and telling my SO1, Colonel Roddy, I was going to sign off. He called me a rude word, and then from then on, he was really, really supportive, and the whole kind of chain of command were supportive. But it's definitely a different feeling once you've signed off, and it's not that you're an outsider, but the fact that you are leaving and you are no longer on the bus with everyone else is different experience. The career transition partnership, as it was then, I think it's probably changed now. Did that at Fars Lane. It was pretty generic, but I think it probably has to be because it caters for such a range of people in terms of ranks, but also what they want to go and do with their careers. You've got people that have served for 4 years, people that have served for 20 years, and how institutionalized they are potentially. I'll be honest, I paid lip service to resettlement, so I didn't, because I knew what I was going to be doing. I didn't bother with the CV, I didn't build a network, I didn't do the LinkedIn, I didn't go to the events, which was a mistake. And I'll be honest, when I then decided to move away from what I was doing to go into the kind of commercial sector and come into financial services, I basically had to re-show resettlement. So I had to speak to Joe and say, Joe, can you help me write a CV? Because you've told me it's pants. Go to the networking events, jump on LinkedIn, and start to kind of build those relationships.
That's really interesting. So I'd just like to touch on that because I think there's a real common misconception, and it's something that, again, the more veterans you speak to, the more I start to see resettlement as a process that lasts far longer than just landing that first civilian job.
Yep.
So what I find really interesting about what you just said is that even though, and granted it was a family-owned business, I totally appreciate that, but still, you went into a civilian role within a civilian business, but still, when you were coming out of that, didn't feel set up properly CV wise or experience wise, or even how to speak or interview, whatever it was for you. That first civilian role didn't prepare you, I guess, for the civilian job market. Can you just elaborate on that just a wee bit, in terms of, I know you said with your CV, or what were the skills in particular that you felt like you were lacking?
So just everything. So I hadn't built a CV, and I vividly remember putting in a session with Joe and basically her telling me my CV was pants because it was completely militarized, having to then do the translation of, well, actually, this is what it means. The fact that a civilian employee doesn't know what SO2 infantry soldiers at APC is going to mean. However, an HR manager within the strategic headquarters for personnel management, for example, is actually something that can resonate, and putting things like metrics into your CV to give them a quantifiable thing. Interviews, so the things like the STAR method, and it was all completely alien to me.
Yeah.
I hadn't had a job interview since I think I worked in the checkouts at Sainsbury's when I was like 16.
Yeah.
So being asked to tell me about a time when you've done X or Y, and having to talk about what I did rather than what the team did. And it's those kind of cultural differences that, and my general experience in the military, we're not very good at talking about how great we are or bigging ourselves up, or we are fairly self-deprecating and don't like to kind of hog the limelight or talk about how wonderful we are.
Yeah. So, I mean, I thank you for being honest about that, because I think one of the reasons I wanted to hone in on that is also because it kind of highlights a wider point, which is that the resettlement process is very important, especially I think the process that you can go through with the OAS to prepare you for those job roles, because actually a lot of the skills that you learn, and we'll get into it in a little bit more detail, But a lot of the skills that you have to learn in resettlement about how the job market works nowadays, actually most civilians don't know either. Things like being prepared for a STAR method, a competency-based interview, for example. I didn't have a clue. I'm not a military person. I did a competency-based interview about 6 months ago, and it was the most embarrassing experience of my life. So these are skills that you kind of get that pocket of time when you land yourself into resettlement that most people, normal people, don't actually have to learn and hone the craft of finding a job and interviewing and getting yourself prepared as a candidate for a role.
And I think, so I would see it as a kind of muscle. So it's something you do need to, so the fact that you've landed a civilian role, you still need to keep your CV updated, you still need to do the networking, be active on LinkedIn, you still need to think about the competency-based questions and what examples you can jot down of your day-to-day work, that actually that was quite a big project I delivered, or that was quite a big thing that I did, and what were the circumstances behind it and what results did I deliver. And it's something you need to kind of maintain going forward, rather than doing it kind of stage gates where you say, right, I'm going to find another job and I'm going to, it's get into that cultural kind of mindset, I think.
So let's get into then post that first role, and you've obviously got in touch with Joe and started doing your interview and CV prep and all of that sort of thing.
Yep.
So the road to financial services, what was that a conscious decision, or was that an opportunity had come up? Was it on your radar, I guess, when you decided to leave your first civilian role?
Yeah, so again, being brutally honest, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Yeah. I had an idea of what my skill set might suit. So, and this will be quite common to a lot of military people. So, risk management, change, project management, those operations, those sorts of roles. Scotland, Edinburgh, Glasgow, quite a number of financial services institutions here. So, and I had lots of contacts or friends either from the regular service who I'd met through networks, or who are reservists now, for example, who worked in financial services. So I thought it would be a good opportunity. I became interested, so I wasn't really tracking Tesco Bank, if I'm being very honest. But I went to one of the OA Scotland networking events, and I met a lady called Louise Hughes, who was the co-chair of the Tesco Bank Armed Forces Network at the time, and she spoke really passionately about the armed forces, about what Tesco Bank were trying to do, how great the culture was at the bank, and also how much they valued the skill sets that veterans could offer and service leavers. So I got in touch with her, looked at some of the jobs on their website. I really appreciated the fact that they were so honest. So I would speak to the talent acquisition team. I would say, I really like this, I'm interested in this role. And they would say, Ken, that job is not for you. And I was like, okay, cool. But it was the honest feedback to say, it's not going to suit you. It's not a round peg for a round hole. But there was a role that came up as a change risk manager. So it's risk management in second line. It was overseeing things like projects and delivery and change. So I applied for that. I got an interview here. Luckily for me, the two people panel, one of them is a guy called John Summers, who was head of specialist risk. He has employed a number of veterans over the years, and absolutely sees the values, the skills, the attributes that service leavers and veterans have, and they offered me the job, and I've not looked back.
That's wonderful. And so the job that you're in now, is that the job that
you
changed since then?
So I did that for 6 months, and an opportunity came up to move into this current role, which is a business architect, which is a fairly, I don't think probably that common a role that
it's
veterans or service users will come across. So I'll give you some context. So architecture in a commercial sense is generally around kind of technology, and the design of the applications and systems that support the delivery of value. For business architecture, we are very focused on, and some of this will resonate with service leavers, so the fact that we are focused on translating strategy to delivery will resonate with people who've worked in planning headquarters and in staff jobs and things like that. And a lot of the work I do is on things like business capability. So in the military sense, we talk about capability. So you buy a tank. Well, a tank's not really a capability, it's a piece of equipment. When you add in things like doctrine and training and logistics and personnel, it then becomes a capability to do something. And same in the business world. When we talk about business capabilities, we're talking about data, technology, people, processes, the synergy and the combination of those things deliver you a capability that helps you then to derive value. So that's
So
what I
once
spend a lot
you'd
of time
kind of
doing.
got used to, I suppose, the difference in the sort of general language of the role, did you actually feel like you were quite well set up for this job because of your experience in the military?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and be under no illusion, so people in the military are very institutionalized and indoctrinated with the language and the common
Hmm.
three-letter abbreviations and things like that, and the acronyms. The financial service is no different. It is
Yeah.
constant three-letter abbreviations, acronyms, and it is you quickly do pick it up though. So
Yeah.
please don't be overfaced by the language. It quickly becomes clear, and you'll get it.
Yeah. And did you find, so coming into working in Tesco Bank, did you find anything culturally um, quite not difficult, but a little bit of a clash of sort of working cultures or anything? Was there anything that you had to adapt to, or did you feel quite
Uh,
comfortable?
the the home working was something I really hadn't kind of
Hmm.
experienced before. So I was very much used to doing, and I think the military's probably changed slightly over the last kind of few years since I was there. So there's a lot more home working and Teams calls and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. But it was something that was quite new to me. The the flat structure is probably something else as well. So we are fairly open plan here. So when I worked in risk, the chief risk officer for the bank would sit like two desks down and would chat to you over a coffee break and stuff
Hmm.
like that, which generally didn't really happen in the military. You
Yeah.
wouldn't sit next to a two-star or that sort of thing. So they're very approachable in terms of the reach of the business. So you could get hold of anyone across the business and say, would you mind me putting in 20 minutes to talk about X? And it wouldn't matter whether they were the head of something, an analyst, or that everyone was kind of really keen to support and say, yeah, no worries. And you kind of explain where your background and where you were coming from, and they would just really positive and engaged and say, yeah, absolutely, I'll
Yeah.
help you, and I'll coach you through this, or I'll explain this to you. So, yeah,
That actually sounds like quite a positive
yeah,
difference,
yeah,
to be
absolutely.
honest. Yeah. So, off the back of that, do you see financial services as something that you'd like to stay in as a long term career, or would you be open to considering perhaps moving on and doing something different? Do you feel quite settled in your civilian career?
Uh, yeah, I feel settled. There was a change during last year, which was Tesco Bank was procured by Barclays.
Hmm.
So there was a separation that happened last year between Tesco Bank. So the insurance part of the bank remained with Tesco Group, and Tesco Bank itself, so its credit cards, loans, its savings products, and the staff moved across to Barclays in a 10-year strategic partnership. But even throughout that, it's all been very positive. Barclays have been extremely welcoming.
Hmm.
So I am the co-chair of the Armed Forces Network group for Tesco Bank. We've engaged with the counterparts in Barclays
Yeah.
who I know from old. Again, really positive, lots of shared experiences and lots of opportunities for the future, which is,
Yeah.
again, really positive.
Yeah, it is. It's really positive. It's quite exciting, and I'm sure there'll be kind of a lot of merging
Hmm.
of minds going on moving forward. But just, I guess, just because I know that some of the audience will be interested, we get a lot of interest in like the Barclays have a lot of employment schemes and all of that for the armed
Yeah.
forces. But just in terms of as of recording now, the recruitment process is still quite separate, isn't it? You'd still apply to Tesco Bank
Yes.
themselves rather than going through any sort of scheme through Barclays and going in that way
Yeah,
for now.
absolutely. So they are different organisations in that
Mm-hmm.
regard. So there are still vacancies on the Tesco Bank website for careers. So I'd encourage people to go and look at those.
Yeah.
Um, for Barclays, and I don't want to sound biased, but I would say they're probably the exemplar for kind of recruitment and transition and support. So
Mm-hmm.
the military talent scheme, they've got the different levels they do for that. So the 3 day kind of induction or the actual placement program they have, I think it's absolutely brilliant, and it's something we would be keen to explore and see where there are synergies and where potentially we can
Yeah.
have people into Tesco Bank in the future. But
Yeah.
I think it's a little way off at the moment.
Yeah. Fair enough. Um, and in terms of your interview process
Hmm.
for Tesco, I'd quite like to just dive into what that
Yeah,
process
absolutely.
was like, if that's all right, because we get so many questions about what are hiring managers looking for,
Hmm.
what is what's in what is the process of interview? How many interviews did you have? Could you just talk me through, perhaps not moving internally from your first role to this one, but that first touch point that you had with Tesco and that hiring process to securing a job. Could you maybe just talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, no worries. So usual CV submission, and then it's sifted by the hiring managers. The hiring managers then select who they then want to interview. They'll put you in for interview. Normally it's a two-person panel for the interview, and I'm trying to think back now. It's generally a competency-based interview. There's different elements, so we benchmark against what we call our win together behaviours, a bit like values and standards, effectively.
Yeah.
And they are can you give me an example when you've one of the this stands out in my mind massively, which was, can you tell me about a time you've experienced conflict as an interview question as a service leaver, which I thought was brilliant.
You're like, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes. Funnily enough.
Yeah. So again, talked about the STAR method previously, and then I found it was a conversation as opposed to a bit like this. So it was a conversation between three people talking about shared experiences, what I'd done, where my skill set lay, what I thought I could bring to the bank, and what I could offer. And one thing I was really keen to kind of labour was the fact that I think military or ex-military have a cognitive diversity that can sometimes be lacking in financial services companies, because there are people who have moved from one company to another company to another company, but it's a kind of cyclical.
Yeah.
Whereas people in the military, and for good reason, do think differently and do have a different approach to things. And I think having that within the team absolutely makes that team much stronger.
Yeah.
Rather than having that kind of groupthink of, well, this is how we've done it in this company, and this is how we do it in this company, and someone that actually takes a step back and says, well, actually, why do we do it like that? Or to question or to challenge, and to have that kind of different voice, which I think is really important.
And do you think as well, because you're kind of coming into the sector new, even just asking questions that maybe someone that's jumped from bank to bank to bank wouldn't ask, kind of throws up, people have to kind of rethink, well, yes, we might have always done it that way, but why do we do it that way actually? If you're kind of going, well, I want to learn a little bit about this and this.
Yeah, absolutely. And
why?
I don't know, maybe it's my kind of personal mindset of, I always really welcome challenge, because it either does one of two things. It either makes me rehearse and re-articulate the reasons for something to reinforce why I think something, or it makes me reevaluate and change my mind.
Yeah.
Either which is, I think, are beneficial things to do. So I would absolutely encourage people when they're on interview to say, well, I do approach problems differently, and I do potentially think differently, but that's a strength as opposed to a weakness.
Absolutely. And so you had your competency-based interview. How many interviews did you have in total?
For that, it was just one interview, and then was offered the role. The hiring manager, so Lee Minto, who actually was going to be my line manager, she actually left between me securing the role and then actually starting. So I had a new line manager when I started, but Lisa was absolutely brilliant with me, and I wouldn't say that they had to make accommodations for me, but they were understanding that I hadn't worked in a financial services business before. I hadn't had that experience, so there was a lot of support and kind of bringing me along and upskilling me, and I think that's the bit to be aware of. It's not, you have skills, you have knowledge, it's some of the ways of working, some of the experiences, it just does take you a little bit of time to get up to speed, but that's not to think you won't get there. You absolutely will. It just takes a bit of time to adjust.
And I'm not going to ask you to get into any sort of specifics on this, but just kind of generally, when you were at that stage where you had that job offer and you were kind of talking about your package, how confident did you feel in terms of maybe negotiating a little bit or asking for what you needed? Because one of the things that, again, we hear so often is that people are often just so grateful to be offered a role that they're not willing to talk about salary, they're not willing to talk about all the sort of extra benefits that might be rolled into a job offer in the civilian world. How did you feel going through that?
I felt it's difficult because Tesco Bank I only have experience at Tesco
Of
Bank.
course.
However, one of the really good things I think about Tesco Bank is when they advertise roles, they will publish the salary band
Okay,
with
that's
the
great.
role.
Okay.
So when they offered me the salary, I could judge where in that the band it's at, and then have the conversation
That's
based
good.
off that. And I absolutely agree, one of the most challenging things when looking at roles when it says competitive salary,
Yeah.
it's very difficult for you to then pitch and position where you think
Yes.
the salary banding for that role is,
Yeah.
and you may really like the role, but then when it gets down to the conversation about benefits and compensation, well, actually it's completely out of a pay range or
Absolutely.
completely below what you need
To live.
to live on
Yeah.
and match the lifestyle you
Yeah.
want to pursue. So that I really like the fact that Tesco Bank again are quite honest and open
Yeah,
and
that is
say
a real positive.
this is the banding salary, so you can temper a name
Yeah, you're going into a
accordingly.
conversation informed.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Okay, good. Um, all right, so let's kind of talk a little bit more about then just your life as a civilian. So you'd mentioned, are you a reservist
Yes.
now? Can you tell me a little bit about your reserve career?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we said before, I didn't leave the military because I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I know not the reserves isn't for everyone, but I was really keen still to be involved with soldiers, to lead soldiers, to be involved in the military. So when I left, I immediately transferred to the reserves. I transferred from the Duke of Lancaster Regiment to the Royal Regiment Scotland, which to a lot of people, it felt like quite a big thing for me to
Yeah.
change cap badge after all
Yeah.
this time. But the Royal Regiment Scotland were really, really welcoming and have been great. So I did subunit command, so company command with 6 Scots. So I had Charlie Company, which covered Glasgow and Lanarkshire. Had a brilliant team with me, half of which seem to work at Barclays now. Really enjoyed that. Did that for 3 years, and then was promoted last year. So took on my first SO1 role as a lieutenant colonel. So I'm currently in a national reserve unit. So it's 100 Regiment Royal Artillery, and the subunit I sit in is called the Old Arms Staff Pool. And effectively, what they do is provide staff officers in to augment headquarters and formations for exercises and operations and support. So I'm aligned to 7 Brigade, who are currently on NATO readiness. So we have quite often staff officers in their headquarters supporting them and enabling them. I still feel there is value in what I do in the reserves. I really enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to August, where I'll be taking command of the 4th Battalion of the Royal Yorkshire Regiment down in Yorkshire.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I've kind of been exploring throughout the episodes with all of our guests is the sort of the psychology that comes with leaving a career in the military and transitioning to being a civilian, and whether this this idea of whether you ever really fully feel like a civilian or not. Do you feel that, because it sounds like you really enjoy your career in the reserves as well, do you feel that that fully kind of scratches that itch for you and allows you to kind of sit quite comfortably now in a life post-military, or does it still maybe do you feel like something is perhaps missing in terms of that personal fulfillment? Because no one signs up to the military because it's not really within their heart and soul to do so, and that can make people feel quite lost when they leave. Does the reserves fill that for you, or perhaps you don't feel that way at all? It's not.
No, I think it's more trying to articulate what it is, because it is quite hard to define. I don't know whether I would describe it as an anchor, and I feel quite centred to the fact that I still have a link and an involvement with the military. I was discussing it. So the other co-chair of the Armed Forces Network, Paul, he is a veteran and he has done the kind of full gambit of reserve. He's now a cadet adult instructor, but he still has the same kind of itch of wanting to be linked to the military and show and have that camaraderie and that the crack and the engagement, and go into remembrance service with emails on and talk to cadets in his example. So I still feel that there is something that being in the reserves makes me still feel involved in the military, and then also feel confident. But also, I know a lot of people with things like armed forces networks within. So a lot of companies now have either signed the Armed Forces Covenant or have signed up to the Employer Recognition Scheme, and are involved in things like OA Scotland. So there's still that continuity and that engagement and that familiarity, I think I would probably describe it
Yeah,
as.
yeah. No, that's completely fair. And so just to kind of start to wrap up, what are the major what's the sort of main advice that you would give to someone who either has signed off or is considering signing off?
How long have you got? So I probably made two other things that I didn't do. So do your estimate.
Mhm.
So think about what is important for you, for your family. Is it location? Is it role? Is it salary? And then make your decisions based on that. I'd say invest in yourself. So we talked about the fact that the networking is really important.
Yeah.
I've seen people, or I've had conversations with people who they're leaving in 6 months and are firing job applications and trying to explain to them that no company is going to wait 6 months for you to start a
No,
job. So
yeah.
think about your kind of timeline of build your network, make the connections, understand what's out there and what companies that you may be interested in or roles you may be interested in. So I know we talk about financial services, but is it financial services specifically you're interested in? If so, is it retail banking? Is it commercial banking? Is it investment banking? Is it being a financial advisor? Or is it the function? So I'm interested in doing risk management. Well, most businesses have a risk management function. So is it the business you're interested in, the sector, or is it the role
Yeah.
type that you're interested
Yeah.
in? Imposter syndrome, everyone has it.
Yeah.
You're not alone. A lot of people kind of don't want to talk about that, but
Yeah.
you have nothing to fear from the civilian sector. I talk a lot in cliches, but I've previously spoken about not being humble but having humility. So be rightly proud of all the things you've achieved in the armed forces. So you have operated, delivered success in some of the most challenging and dangerous environments. There are very few civilian roles that can emulate that. So you should be rightly proud of that.
Mhm.
And it is a real string to your bow. But be aware, the organisation you're going into, the people you'll be working with are highly intelligent, highly capable, and highly specialist in what they do.
Mhm.
So they're not fools, and they're it's hard to kind of compare experience. So be cognizant of the fact that you are new to this, whatever industry you're going into. It'll take you a while to learn the ropes, but you do have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
Um, leadership, management are different, I would say, in civilian career. Um,
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, if you can elaborate further, because I think that's something people leaving the hear feel like they're able to lead, especially people
mhm.
that have been, gone to Sandhurst and kind of done those sort of higher ranking roles. So yeah, let's get into that because I think that I've never heard someone say that before, and I'm just instantly like, yes, that is so correct.
So again, my experience. So people in the military potentially surprisingly have a high level of EQ, I would say. So quite quickly pick up on nuances and how people are feeling at work,
Hmm.
and are quite quick to put their arm around people and how are you feeling, and doing that kind of leadership thing. And again, not wanting to talk in cliches, but you don't have to be in a position of leadership to demonstrate leadership. So I don't have any direct reports at the moment, but I'm quite happy to volunteer for things, to lead things, to
Yeah.
put my hand up. Whereas other colleagues may be happy just to do their kind of 9 to 5 job. I'm
Hmm.
happy to put my hand up and be a co-chair of a network
Hmm.
to do those kind of additional responsibilities. That's not a negative thing. It's just people have different approaches and what they want to get out of their civilian role or
Hmm.
career.
And also, do you think sometimes, just because of how obviously as well the career structure and the ranking structure works within the military, I'm just so interested in what you said about difference between leadership and management. Is that when you, for example, get your line manager or whatever,
Hmm.
within your civilian role, they're not going to perhaps perform all of the functions that you would have been used to in the military in terms of, I don't want to say hand holding, but leading you through your career and progression as such, that there could be a little bit more of a, what am I trying to say? Perhaps not a disconnect, but you're in charge of your own progression,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I
And
guess is what I'm getting at.
no, absolutely. And the cultural difference of not being moved every 2 years
Yeah.
or being directed by another organisation to say, oh, by the way, you're moving to this country or you're being sent somewhere else. Your career is your own, and you deal with it as you want. I think I'm very lucky. So I've had great line managers since I've been here, who are very supportive. When I've expressed interest in a course or looking at a different area, or really supportive, and it is absolutely a conversation. So I absolutely wouldn't say be worried about having those conversations. And when I decided to move from the area of the bank I was in, the bank were really keen to retain me, and I've found a role in another part of the bank. And again, all very supportive and positive.
Yeah. So my final question for you is one that I gave you a brief outline of what we were going to kind of chat about before we started recording, but I do have one question that I ask everyone right at the end, and we've touched slightly on a bit of this, but obviously we are from combat boots to business suits, and on our lovely merch that we've got here are fantastic mugs, which you are allowed to keep your mug, Ken, as a gift, and a thank you for being on the show today. Yep. I do expect you to have every single brew that you ever have here at the bank from your mug to fly the flag, but that's just me.
100%.
I'm not going to chase you off on that. However, there are two sort of statements here. There's combat boots and business suits. Which of these do you feel the most affiliated with?
Business suits, I would have to say.
Really? Wonderful. Okay, you're the first guest that's ever said that.
And the reason I say that is it was a really difficult decision, but it was a conscious decision that my future, my career was civilian employment. I'm still involved in the military because I enjoy it and I'm passionate about it, but the reality is, if push came to shove, it would have to be the reserves that I would have to dial down if something had to give, unfortunately.
Yeah. Do you know what? This really has been a wonderful conversation. I thank you. I thank you for your honesty as well. I feel like we've touched on quite a lot here, and also just with your answer there, it is really lovely to hear someone that seems to have really settled into your civilian life, and that's a wonderful thing, and I think that's a really positive message for a lot of our viewers out there as well, is that it's not a case of you're closing the door and you're always going to feel like you're hankering to get back in, that actually you can settle into a life post-military, and you clearly seem to also love what you do, which is great. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation with Ken. If you would like to learn anything more about Tesco Bank specifically, but also the financial services sector more widely, please drop a comment below on wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. You can, of course, contact the Officers Association Scotland via our website, or you can come along to some of our wonderful events. If you have any specific questions for Ken, again, you can drop a wee comment below, and I'll happily pass them over. And yes, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and we will see you again soon. Bye.